Aloha. Good morning. It's 4:44 in the morning. We got some thunder and lightning outside. Very, very frightening. Galileo, Galileo. Galileo, take me home. I don't know how that goes. I was trying to hack into the system, and so when you do natural language processing and I'm trying to figure out language, it would be nice to have the same text in different languages. Obviously, the Book of Mormon, different languages, closed canon, tied to Nephi. Maybe the whole book, maybe just 1st and 2nd Nephi, which would be the language of Nephi before it was corrupted. And so the Mormon church, so you'll notice that I go to Blue Letter Bible. You notice that I type because it's just faster. There's some things with Blue Letter Bible that aren't perfect. And let's actually see if we can find it. And one of the things that I would prefer is that I could somehow search on this transliteration. I'm going to search, so I've figured out that I can search on these. So this word supposedly means light. It's obviously the sound, lutz. And it's a TS sound, like Lutz. Like Mary Jane Lutz. And Mary Jane Lutz was a descendant of Alexander Ruthven, who was killed by King James. So if I wanted to search for that, they have a nice wildcard search. Sometimes when you do the Hebrew, the letter character, it gets all funny. So if I search for this, it's not going to give me any results in King James, but it says there's 6 results in the WLC. And there are 7 results in the King James of the word lose, the King James version. So that's informative. And what would be nice is if I moused over this, I could get the transliteration back into English. But again, it's fast. I'll go to the Mormon website. And so anyway, I was going to scrape it, and I still may. It irked me. So you can get a list of the languages, which I grabbed. And then I was going to grab the Book of Mormon and do some textual analysis on it to, kind of work on this language problem. La luz. So I titled this, come on, Cairn, give the light. Dar la luz literally means. So if you would do a transliteration, how would you do this so it would be easier to understand how the pieces go? Would you do it, to give the light. So I'm thinking about this from a parsing point of view. So you had to add all these extra brackets. So you could do to give the light, and then you could do some sort of regex on that to make sure that works. So it just resonates with me, the phrase dar la luz. It could be dar la luz. This Z is not Zaire, it's Lutz. I don't know how to pronounce Lutz. Like Mary Jane. Lutz. Like Alexander Ruthven. So these are connections in my brain. But what we're learning is L-U-Z and Z-E-I-R That's a different Z. And then if you go back to the Hebrew language, I think it's this one. They have these things called the sofifs. And I think this morning, as I was getting up, I figured this out. I'm getting up early because I went to bed really early. I had to do some mental task that was really hard because I wasn't prepared and I was really having to push a boundary of a domain that I'm not good at. Well, I'm okay at. So they close the M at the end. At the end, they change the letters, indicate the end of a word. They do not do anything else but indicate the end of the word. So what that tells you is these letters all by themselves can be a word, and so there can be some confusion. So you could have the word am and ma, and then you could have ma'im, and ma'im could have been two words. The same thing with Allah ma or Allah ma. So I think one of the things going on when Mormon reads Nephi is he's like, oh, we thought Mama was a virgin man, but you were saying Ma. And so there was something in the writing of Nephi that was very careful that Mormon could understand it. And the bitter Mormon was saved by Nephi. I think that's going to be a theme for many of us bitter Mormons. And so what's that's telling us is the Masoretics. Oh, I gotta go there. We're supposed to believe in the 33-degree Masons, the temple of it's the temple of Jehovah that builded, and I don't know that I like Solomon. His name is Jedediah. So if you recall, David, did David have two names? I don't know that actually David did. But David was anointed way before Saul was deposed, or he was either Harry carried. There was something about him doing it himself. It was either through the stomach gut, which they called the fifth rib, or his head was cut off. The letter O on my keyboard is being a little bit quirky. Doesn't work all the time. And just think about the irony of that. If you're trying to, like, we live in this digital world where we can have drafts and rechange things. Now, my question is, did Mormon, after he read that he was mistaken, go back and change everything he had written in his summary? No, of course not. He just included the plates. He learned that lesson, and he passed on error. So there's an error. If you read Alma, when it's talking about the Liahona, it's saying Nephi was bad somehow. And if you think about Nephi, when he's telling in the beginning of his story, he tells them that he tells his children, he doesn't lie to them. I cut off his head. I stole his stuff. I went to the treasury and took the plates. You don't think he took other things out of the treasury? Like recovered his lost goods? Look at the story of Abraham. He went and recovered Lot and his lost goods, and he looted the place. And then if you give true knowledge, there's the fear that your children, in the traditions of your fathers, will misinterpret that. By him giving that true knowledge, did that lead to the master mayhem concept of the Gadianton robbers? Was it based on Nephi's story, or did the Gadianton robbers also go back and read something in the books that we don't have about Cain and Abel and making an oath with the wicked one? Making an oath with the earth, the number 7. Remember, the number 8 is you have to answer for the oath of the earth 7. And on the 8th day, you appear in the temple. Or on the 40th day, or on the 80th day. It's a factor of 8. 7 is Sem, Shema, Sheba, Sabbat. They link it to the Sabbath. Somehow God created the earth in 7 days. Which God would be tied to a 7-day oath? Are you worshiping the right God? The 8th is Bosum in Russian. So Russian is the only language that the number 7 and the number 8 sound very similar. In Hebrew, I think it's Sem. Let's just look it up. So again, we have Kima. Kima, the 7 stars of the Pleiadians. We probably have Anunnaki in there. But no, that doesn't matter. Sabwa, Seba, Sibin, Seba. And that, I think that's actually Seba pronounced. Sibana. That one's close. So it's almost there. Because if you look at 8, you got Marom again, height. The high waters of the fountain of Marom. How do you say waterfall in the Bible? Have you ever seen the word waterfall in the Bible? They call it fountain. So there's 8. So it's close. It's got an M. Shem. Let's hear that.
Strong's H 8083. Shemone.
And I like Shemone over Solomon or Shalom. Maybe that's what I should start saying instead of aloha. I should say Shemone. I would want to say Shemona because me is lower. It's a lower trajectory. It's forward and up, but na is up. Shemona. So maybe Solomon's name is actually Shemona. Rich, robust. It's not a nice way to call me fat. That's a good name for me then. No problem. So you get to a place where they call it a primitive root. And if you look at language, how in the world does the word for island only represent one letter? That Kima thing, I almost want to go there. So which one sounds the closest? Simone. So let's just go to 7.
Strong's H 7655. Shiva. Shiva.
Shiva, Shimone. Like Shiva, a shiv in the back. Etu Brute. Sheba, Shaba, an oath. To swear an oath. So they're close. So and what's interesting is there's another pair in Russian that sound the same too. Oh, come on. It's 10. Sem. Wilson. How do you say God? Bog. So that's where I think that's me conjecturing where it mostly comes from. They have so many V's in their language, in their alphabet. So this is Bog. Bog. Sem. God. Oath. Os. 8. Dievich. 9. Diesich. 10. So they're the only language I know that the 9 and the 10 are very similar in sound as well. Dievich, Diesich. And if you recall, the 7 has this V sound in its Shiva, in its oath, V. 9, Dievich, 10, Diesich. This is the casting of the nines. When you go from 9 to 10, you go to a new digit. It's like your car odometer, right? It's 99999, and then it flips over. Oh, look, I just said that, and it's exactly 5 a.m. And remember when I started, it was 444. So let's see if we can back out of this thread and remember where it was. So they obviously had a problem distinguishing between words, which is kind of where I was going with some of this, and with how I would go and do this. So I wanted to focus first on Dar la Luz, and then maybe come on, Cairn. So Dar could be a different word. Now you'll notice I like to roll that R. It's easier to roll the R when it's R. That's the easiest sound to do it. Ear. So ear. I have to move my mouth a long way. R. I'm up high. R. I'm coming down into the rolling R. So from a language point of view, it's not a requirement. It's poetry. With young children in Spanish Island, you would just say the verb. So you would just say da. And it could possibly be the wrong tense. But then we have da, me, lo. Give me it. Very nice language. And you could put the M there, and it wouldn't hurt anything. And it would just be colorful. But it would make sure you understood what da is, because da may have multiple sounds. By saying dar, I'm telling you it's a verb. Me, lo, to give me it, or give me it. So you would just naturally drop the word to. Dar la luz. So if I wanted to understand this, if I were to just take the transliteration, which is the sound, can I reproduce that as sounds in Hebrew? And then second, knowing the translation, how would I translate to give the light in Hebrew? And when I say Hebrew, I'm going for the language of Isaiah. You know, that's the easiest one. I don't like to say Solomon because I don't think that was his name. Going back to all that, Daniel was anointed king a long time before. He had this Mattaniah, Zedekiah thing. When was he anointed? And whether or not he was put on the throne, you just go back to David and Saul. There's a difference between being anointed. So that means there's some sort of hierarchy of prophet I'm going to put prophet institution because it was called a college at this time. And there was probably, with Josiah, there was probably the Egypt versus, I'm going to say North, because there's two groups up there, camps in this institution of college. And remember, Josiah went out to stop the Egyptians. So Josiah's, I'm going to say true wife, according to, because there's so much there. The true wife had two sons, and she was linked to Egypt. The other wife was linked to the north, which tells you that they were in different camps. They're competing over who's going to be. And so Zedekiah is put onto the throne by the north. There were two that were put on the throne by Egypt, and two put on. So that actually makes the Zarahemla story, when you find the Mulekites, even more interesting. Because it seems like Nephi and his father, because of language, was in the Egypt camp, and they may have not been. And then you got, Zedekiah's descendants, Zara, the issue, Himla, the comfort, or the Himla, it might be Kemla. Hemla means, like the mercy, or, to be saved, but it also means to be scattered somehow. That one's easy. Um, you know, then there's a question of who's going to lead. Remember when they first meet, they can't communicate, so language has been lost, but that would be even more so if they were kind of in that north camp. So there might have been kind of the introduction of Assyrian writing that we read about in Daniel already in play. And so when you try to decouple some of that, you have to put it in order. The word Tor is supposedly a turtle dove. I don't think they existed. It's made up. Oh, it's in Genesis. It must have existed. Okay. Genesis was the first book written. Of course, that's what they tell us. So I give credence to Songs of Solomon. I would go highest priority to Isaiah. So Jeremiah was the prophet. Jeremiah, was he in the Egypt camp or in the north camp? Remember, was Josiah in the north camp? Josiah was likely in the north camp. That means Jeremiah was likely in the north camp. It's very possible that Lai, one of the reasons he got out of Dodge, is because Jeremiah was an unfriendly. You had competing prophets with competing ideas. I don't think Jeremiah was rose-colored in understanding the destruction, but his worldview on how to solve the problem was, let's go north. And maybe if they would have gone south, they could have prevented the destruction of the city. Lai, I think, got out of town really fast. He may have been converted before, but I think, like, the moment. So, the moment Josiah dies, I'm going to just put Jeremiah, anoint, so I don't know that we have this, anoint Zedekiah. And there are two names. There's the name of the family, and then there's the name of the priest. And David has a child that could have been Simon or someone else, and they give a name. It might have been Absalom. And then I think it was Nathan who shows up and gives another name when the baby was born. So the antis are going to say, well, Zedekiah wasn't called Zedekiah until the north put him on the throne. Oh, but it's just showing that there's intrigue there. There's a soap opera going on. Soap opera. Where is that? Soap opera. Think about how we say that. Soap opera. I wonder what that, going back to the transliteration. So if I were to understand it, then I want to search for Tor. And it would be nice if I could just search for the transliteration here and get to it. But it says probably the same as, so now it means to turn a border, a plate of hair. What? Do they even know what they're talking about? Which just tells me they've lost the language. So this is not a new word. This is an old word. And tool, primitive root, to search out, to seek out, a merchant, a trader. They have no clue what this word means. To spy out. And then right now it's a bit of a challenge for me to quickly go to it because of search capabilities. But let's see if I can find one. Tool. Okay, now so I don't know if this is the right tool, like I'm spelling it correctly. So in Aramaic, we have a rock or a hill. What I'm saying is we think the Aramaic is corrupt, but it's probably older, which means it's probably closer to the true value. So here's an example where they come in alignment. This is the Hebrew. This is the Aramaic. Is that right? It'll say Aramaic. Oh, here's one. Aramaic. A gown. A hose. To pound, to hammer. There's so much. So what they're wanting to say is the corruption occurred when they went to Babylon. My argument is maybe not. Maybe the language was more clear because it was still there. So here's a ring dove. This is the turtle dove, a term of endearment. And here was my point. In Aramaic, tor means a bullock, an ox. I didn't see this before. A bullock as a traveler, an ox. Or a wall by mistake. So now we got all these. So to me, I didn't know that it was going to go here, but this shore is part of Shazer. It's the wall. It is a wall. Mistake. It is a wall. It's a wall of mountains. It's the Midian Mountains. When you're crossing the Red Sea, you're staring at a wall of mountains. It's part of Shazer. So anyway, they're saying I'm wrong, and the strong guys spend a lot of time there. That's the whole point. You have to have discussion if you want to move forward with understanding language. I would argue that tor, as an ox or a bullock, makes way more sense than a turtle dove. So if we look at the etymology of the earliest moment that word was used, The Masoretes are 1000 AD. The Aramaic may have been 500 BC, 600 BC. It may have been slightly different, but you're not going to go from an ox or a bull all the way to a bird. That's not to say they didn't barbecue chickens at their holy barbecue. That's just saying you got to be careful with language. You just can't assume anything. Okay, so if I were to look for dar, la, I'm going to get so many answers here. So let's do la, So the reason I like to do it this way is I believe the fundamental sound form is a consonant and a vowel. La. And the ah with a W just says your mouth can relax afterwards. So we have ah, ya, la, where the la is different than ayal. So it's like there's an extra AW at the end of the L to change it from a man to a woman. Ayal, ayala. Gender, that's a nice, easy story. That's good language. That there's a gender difference. In the language, you can pick up the gender difference. So, al is supposed to mean not in Aramaic. Not, and then it has all these meanings in the ancient Hebrew. In this case, I would have a hard time believing the Aramaic is correct. Because if you look for the word not, niet, no, no. There's actually in Hebrew a word called no that means not. Lo, no. That could have, and so then you would have to understand what influence was happening with the Aramaic by the Babylonian language. So what is the word for no in Sumerian, Akkadian, Chaldean, and all those northern languages? And then you would say, oh, okay, that was an influence from the north. Ergo, it is not the language of the time of Isaiah. So here's Allah. So Allah could mean cursing or swearing. Is that like swearing an oath, or is that a negative oath? Allah can mean to go up, to ascend the mountain. Allah can mean oak tree. And so it's really hard to point this out directly, so I might pause for a minute. So I'm looking for 5927, and look how many words point to it. When all these words are pointing to it, it's suggesting it's a primitive word, a true primitive word. The highest, the most high God. And then they tie it to Jehovah. Jehovah is Yah. Oh, man. So this is what I was looking for. Allah. To ascend, to go up a mountain, to grow, to come forth out of. So I think Nafi used this word when he said he came out of his parents. He sprouted forth from them. And then I think he used the metaphor of Mormon as a homage to who they were. So his father was the one that brought him to the island, and his mother was tied to the waters and the land somehow. So that's not law exactly. We got Allah's over here to jump, to be joyful, to rejoice. And it's got a z at the end. This, I just found this, but this is part of Shay's there. And you know how I know? That's the name of the mountain in Arabian. Laos, Allah. It's the highest mountain in the region. The Midian Mountains. Shazer. It was a mountain of almonds. The almonds are the first trees to bloom in the spring. Oh, I don't want to lose that. We're going to go back to light. There's no snow in the Middle East. It's hot. Your sins as scarlet shall be as white as snow. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. Why in the world would the Guarani language have the word snow? So you can get down to down to Buenos Aires, and there's snow down there. Why would they have snow unless that word came from somewhere, and unless they were traveling far and wide to places that there was snow? Okay, so to me, that's not La, that's Allah, and I really like Allah. There's a link to the mountain of joy, to go up, ascend, and I'm going to put I learned that by studying just one little phrase, and I'm not even done. So dar, let's see dar, and so I'm searching here because I'm looking for it here in the transliteration, which I can't find on the other place. So I found it a primitive root, adar. So I'm going to put, what am I doing? And if I wanted to be careful, like with Allah, I don't mind that I have to go find that again. But it'd be a lot easier if I wrote down the H number, right? The key. It's 59. Let's see. So 5927. And I have to do that because I can't search easily at the moment within the Bible. So this one, 132, and this one is Dar. Not exactly Dar, but it's the sounds, and that's a good starting point. Right? It's a good starting point to. And so, this is just a nice website because it's fast. It's intuitive. They obfuscate your data so you can't lift everything. I've written a script that'll grab this right here. So they intentionally obfuscate this because they spend a lot of time to crop it, and I understand that. But if I wanted that, but you don't want it, at one point I thought I wanted it. This in a text form might be better, but it's useful to have this full form. Now I'm looking at the word and where it was used. It's in Isaiah. I'm going to go, cha-ching. That's a primitive word. It's also in Exodus. Oh, good. Right hand. Something I was reading last night about that. Thumb. Right hand. Exodus, probably the same chapter. I didn't pay attention. Thou shalt kill the ram and take his blood and put it on the tip of the right ear of Aaron and on the tip of the right ear of his sons. You're putting blood on the ears of the priests with the thumb. Oh, it doesn't say with the thumb you put it. And upon the thumb of their right hand and upon the great toe of their right foot. And sprinkle the blood about the altar round about. Is this a misinterpretation of the blood oath? So if you put blood on your thumb and went ear to ear, did they misunderstand the blood oath? And it's right. The right side is the natural man side. It's the Aaronic priesthood. It's the lower priesthood. That's the only mention of thumb. Look at your hand. It's the biggest one. Then there's a story about some pagan king that they capture and they cut off his thumb. Is that not here? And so why did they cut off thumbs? Why did the Arabs cut off hands? In the Old Testament, if two men are fighting and the women get involved, the wives, and it says if one of the wives touches the phallus of the other man, they have to cut off her hand. Now I'm like, is this accidental as part of some little wrestling thing? Or was she like grabbing the scrotum or the phallus and like using it as part of the fight? Like, this is a severe fight. Because that seems pretty severe, like, oh, I bumped into him, I touched his phallus, and so I have to lose my hand. The left and the right side. The left and the right side. Think about what goes on in the temple. So in the temple, Joseph came up with some stuff. They have those records. They're not going to make that available to us. And somehow that, at some point, was the blood oath. The other part of the blood oath was with the stomach, where the womb is for a woman, the fifth rib for a man. And we don't have, we can't move forward until the church releases what we have, so we can move forward. And, then you talk about how a lamb is sacrificed. They cut the throat, but they don't decapitate it. You decapitate a man in battle on the battlefield, but a sacrificial lamb, you cut its throat, but don't decapitate it. At the end, what happens to the meat of the head? Do you eat it? So, like, the Kazakhs, for centuries, when they kill a lamb, they'll decapitate it. Or, I don't know how they kill it. I don't know their haram, halal, cleanliness factors of butchering the animal. But they play soccer with the lamb. And they've probably been using it as a soccer ball, the head of the lamb, for a long time. In Central Africa, when you collectively kill an animal in a net, the first one to run to the animal and touch its head gets what's called a double portion. They get a portion of the main body and they get the head. They get to eat the head. Allah Adar 142. It's in Isaiah, clearly true language. It's also in Exodus. They didn't lose it. Because remember, Genesis Exodus is Masoretic. It's very late. So they didn't have any problems with that word. That means glorious. Rock dog. You have these specially trained dogs on the outside of town. And inside of town, you have a bunch of lambs with an ox. Was he the lamb of God? Or was he the ox shepherd of lambs? When I was a kid, there was a cartoon about a Toro right to a stand. He had a ring in his nose. And that's how you tame an ox. When I say ox, I'm speaking of a male cow, not necessarily castrated. So normally you castrate them to make them obey. Why did Abraham get circumcised? What happened at the cross? I'm going to go off on that. We're supposed to believe that Yeshua suffered more than any other human in about 12 to 24 hours. He had to talk to some people. They spit on him. Some woman in the 1700s, and she said he was whipped with a certain type of whip, and it was like 1,500 lashes. Remember, there's this 39-40 rule of being whipped in the Hebrew culture. So I don't know how many, 40 times 40, so it's, yeah, that would be a nice number, 1,600 lashes. And, the likes of Mel Gibson with The Passion of the Christ, that is the passion. Okay, I could tell you worse things that could happen to you. Let's look at some prophets. What did Abraham have to do? So why would you have to cut off part of your penis? What is that a similitude of? I don't have that in the Passion story. And then Abraham does this weird thing with his servant, where the servant sticks either his thumb or his pinky up the anus of Abraham. If you don't know what that is, you haven't been reading the Bible. The inner thigh. So, where's the word shit in the Bible? They have to defecate. The eldest servant of his house. So he's going on a journey and he's making an oath. Zaken Abed. We're not given the name of the servant. So this servant is going and looking for Abraham, Rebecca. So, this is what we would say is the eunuch. He's the ruler of the household, the keeper of the house. He's of the servant class, the bonds, whatever that means. I don't think it's hierarchical like we think of slave. I think it is, he had a job, he liked this man, he wanted to be with this man. What's your alternative? Put thy hand, yad, hand. We could really go crazy because the euphemism of hand here is penis. Under my thigh. Yadak. So, Catholic priests don't grow up thinking, I want to grow up and stick my penis in the anus of a young boy. At some point, they're read into something that makes them think of that. The seat of procreative power, the loins. The outside of the thigh, the flank, the base. So where are they going to call it what it is? The buttocks. So I'm not going to look at the other one. The other one is Jacob. Jacob wrestles with the Lord all night. Later is called Israel, which means God won. And then after that, his anus was sore forever. And as a result, they no longer ate the anus portion of the cow or goat or lamb. In terms of the unclean food, camel regurgitates its food. And so in the Arabic culture, they'll eat the camel, but for whatever reason, the Hebrews won't. With birds, you eat birds that eat seeds. You don't eat predator birds. Predators are no. So the best meat I've ever had is in Argentina. It's got less pampas. But I think a part of the reason it has the best meat is possibly the slaughtering process and how they cut the meat. But basically, you have hip bones on a cow, and everything kind of on that diagonal of the tail to the hip is the rump or the anus, and you don't eat it. And so you would feed it to the dogs or whatever, but you just, in this culture, you don't eat it. Now, impaling in the anus was something the Romans did as part of the crucifixion. I did another video of the Christ. I don't want to put crucifixion. Okay, I didn't catch that in the Passion of Christ. I haven't watched the Passion of the Christ. It's wrong. It's emotionally disturbing, but it's wrong. What really happened is so disturbing. The Germans, when they figured it out, wanted to kill all the Jews. That's how disturbing it is. If you recall yesterday, the Sin of Judah, what a great website this is. I remembered the phrase, I typed the phrase, I'm at the phrase. The Sin of Judah. So we got altars, trees, high places. We got Josiah finding a prophecy in the treasury room of the temple. He consults with a woman prophet. Then he destroys all of the trees in the high places. So there's something about Asherah here. There's something about Heavenly Mother here. And the Asherah tree, which we would call the maypole, which is tied to the phallus in some ways. And then he took all of the priests and placed them on the altar as a sacrifice. Did he draw and quarter them? Quarter. And it says he dug up bones of priests and also burned them on the altar. So now, imagine, this happened with Josiah. So the Nephi family knows this story. So now imagine Nephi, this story gets out to the South Americans. I'm just going to use that. And we supposedly have a story of cannibalism. Did it say Josiah ate the priests? No, he thought they were bad. He probably cut them in pieces and barbecued them on the altar that you normally barbecue animals on. It didn't say anywhere that he ate them. Now, how does that link to the Passion? So now we're getting to a place where, oh shit, worst thing I could ever imagine. And it gets worse, because if you look at the history of the crucifixion process, they would kill loved, they would hang the children in front of the man before he died. They would cut the throat of the wives in front of the man. And based on me noodling on this, there was some wheel of fortune. It was tied to the treasury of the temple. Remember, he overturned the tables. They did some sort of roulette thing with the animals. So the animals were being mistreated. So there was some sort of thing where they would put the small chickens or whatever the bird was and the small lambs, because they wanted it to be efficient. And they would play some game with 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10 probability on this wheel to cheat the ignorant people out of money somehow. And so if you're going to understand that the cross was likely about 40 days. Oh, is there a theme there? His saying about love your friends to lay down your life, that's bidirectional. He possibly had to see lots of friends die in front of his eyes. And then, I'm just going to put the word there might have been something about cannibalism there. And now imagine you taking the sacrament. What that would mean. You're being lied to. I don't know the truth, but I know what we have is not all there. Based on the data we have, you look at, he gave up the ghost and he inclined his head in the original Greek, whatever that phrase is. It's actually reclined his head, like the same word when he says the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. It's the same word. He's upside down. No, Peter wanted to be different than all of the other people in the world. So we have the clue there. So if everyone's being crucified right side up, of course Peter's going to be the one upside down. And just like St. Catherine's going to be the tallest mountain in Sinai, not Sinai. So the clues are there. And you can piece through what a 40-day torture with an impaling can do. I've kind of gone through it, and I think of, I'm not going to go anymore. That's like, if you want to understand what actually happened. Let me know when I'm doing it. Okay, so let's just, somehow Jacob got something happening. How did Isaiah die? He was sawed in half, possibly. What happened to Job? He had worms eating at his flesh. And so they turned it into some sort of game, and it was a mockery of the Jews. So the Jews were offended by the blasphemy. It says Pilate and Philippi, Herod, became friends. So where was this Herod at in terms of Jewish tradition and whatever? Remember, his father wanted to be the king of the Jews. There was a prophecy about a king of the Jews appearing. So his father wanted to use the ways of the world to be claimed as that king. There was a crucifixion in this time frame of 5,000 people related to an eagle at the temple. Remember, Joseph Smith said the Zechariah that was killed at this time on the temple altars was the Baptist's father. I'm very careful with Baptist. I'm starting to think the Baptist's name was Johanna. You need a brother and a sister. And in the Hebrew, sister and cousin are very interchangeable. Johanna could have been Magdala. So we have this story of John the Baptist being beheaded. Let's put that in there. So they have to go and get permission from Pilate to kill Jesus, but they don't have to go and get permission to kill John the Baptist. So there's something hinky with that story. But if you take it and you do a stereogram, hinky, hinkly, Gordon B, Ramienko. So then in Europe, we have this idea. So Mel Gibson got it right on the movie. So in the movie Braveheart, he sees his wife, he sees her throat get cut in front of him. If you go to Gladiator, you would have seen your son get hung. Before they cut your wife's throat, they would have put her in the cat's cradle and taken turns with her. When they talk about casting lots for his cloak, remember your nakedness is related to your wife. His cloak was his wife. They were casting lots on who got to go first. Once you figure this out, you can never hear the song Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, Little Boy Blue and the Man in the Moon. When you coming home, son, I don't know when, but we'll be together then, so we'll have a good time then. Beautiful song, but after you understand what happened at the cross, you can never understand that song again. Cats in the Cradle, Silver Spoon. I'm thinking that's tied to some sort of castration event. Little Boy Blue, and I'm going to put home Judas, his son. Man in the Moon. They put his head in some orb as a display. They had cut him in quarters. This is after he died. So now going back to England, what did they do when they drew and quartered men later in the stories? They would put him on the four quarters of the city so the family wouldn't steal the body. Steal. and claim resurrection. Now, whether they knew that's why they were doing it or not, that's what they did. Can I have his body? Read carefully. There were 2 linen cloths. One wrapped the body, one wrapped the head. There's a reason Thomas is doubtful. So there was some mark on his left side. That was the mark of the cross, the number 10 in Chinese. And they cut him into the left side because if you understand left side cross, if you understand how they knew how to manipulate a body. So they could remove the intestines, and they could remove. They basically, you read what they remove in the normal. They leave the liver, but not the fat of the liver or something. So they leave the liver, they leave the heart, they take the intestines and kidney, and they could literally take them out of him. And then the question for a doctor would be, how many days could you live? At some point they'd castrated him. The the spoon might have been just one testicle, but I think eventually they emasculated him, which goes back to why we are circumcised. And we probably should be circumcised as adults, so we're aware of why we're doing it, because then the pain would have some meaning. Okay, so you've told me a story of the cross that took 12 to 24 hours. So they went back and forth between people. If these 2 people are not in the same town, that's not happening. Oh, but they were in the same town. Oh, okay. He was actually tortured at one place, which was a high mountaintop, which I think was later, well, if we believe any of that history, it could have led to some revolts. There was a high mountaintop. It took the Romans a long time to take that place. And when they got up there, the story is all the people killed themselves and burned each other. He was possibly tortured there. They did it in the temple. And as a mockery, because Johanna, as part of the mockery, they had Johanna serve as the high priest. She was of the descendancy, but she was also the caretaker. I don't think she ever baptized him in life. He was baptizing. Read John, the Gospel of John. He was out baptizing. I am not worthy to baptize you. They were using as a baptismal font this big bathtub. It wasn't a bathtub, it was a big soup pot that was part of the barbecue. And it's hilarious that that's what the Mormons have done with their temple baptism. So in the middle of being tortured, he's being taken care of by his sister, and she takes care of him in the tub. She bathes him and tries to clean him up from day to day when they allow it, but he's being tortured for an extended period of time. And then, so in terms of songs, you go Rindere mi corazón. Please break my heart. And it's not, that's not what it is intended to read in the current hymn. It's because he's watching, they're playing some sort of game where he's watching his children and women die. It might be one. Based on a game. He has one stake, not a nail, so it's wood, in his right palm through his left wrist to the shore side. He can move around. So it's just a stake connecting those two. Think about how deacons and teachers put their hands when they pass the sacrament. You put your right wrist over your left, or your right hand over your left wrist. You put a stake through it, so you can move around. You got to remember he's upside down. Maybe there's a silver spoon, which was probably a brass bronze spoon, because that's what was in the temple. And if you look on the convex or concave of the spoon, it turns things upside down. Let's look up the letter Maim, the letter M, the middle of time, the meridian of time. Oh, come on. I'm going to have to get rid of this brave search. How about Hebrew? We've got to. Oh, there. He is the ox water cross. A-M-T. Truth in Hebrew. Ox water cross. Do I have that open somewhere? I don't think I do. I'm the Aleph and the Tav. So we got all worked up. The Aleph became kind of a Chi. They talk about XT Mass in the 1611 King James Bible. That's the Ot. That's the ox at the cross. That is the Aleph and Tav, the beginning and the end. And what had to happen in the middle? The M, the waters. That's what baptism's about. If we get baptized, we don't have to go through his baptism. Aleph, the ox. Maim. Where's the Maim? Maim water. Tav, the cross. So the Mormons, we don't have crosses because of symbolism. Okay. I don't know if we're going to get back to that. I am the way, the truth. I just put truth like that. You're going to get a lot there. Truth, a moon. Aleph, M. We got an N at the end. Amen. Aleph, M. Every time you say amen, think of the ox in the water in his suffering. Amen. And there it is. Alex. contracted from Aman. Yeah, it's got to have the tav to support the confirm. I am the true drop doctrine. I am truth. When he says, I'm the way, the light, and the truth, he's speaking Greek, but he's not speaking Greek. Remember in the water ox in Chinese is one big step again. Ox is two knives. So it could be a double-edged sword or two cuts. If you want to quarter someone so that he would be dead at that point, you would cut across and you would cut up and down. That is the top. Now go back and read Isaiah. Remember what Nephi said. Nephi said there is a proof of the Savior in my words, in his second chapter. And then he just quotes something. My bowels, search for bowels, and when I say Isaiah, the time frame, Ecclesiastes, Solomon, so Psalms, Proverbs, Songs of Solomon. Oh, there, I typed the note. The Songs of Solomon. It's there. So remember in the Book of Mormon, we learn about a zenith and a zenith, and we know there's something about a tree. The question is, what tree? Is it a shitty tree? Is it the acacia, which is what they built the Ark of the Covenant out of, supposedly? Is it an almond tree? Which, if you recall, is tied to who became the Levite nation. They each had a staff. One of them grew. The almond tree branch that became Aaron's branch was in the Ark of the Covenant. Was it an oak? Oak, the oaks of Bashan, the cedars of Lebanon. Was it a hemp tree, which they had in the Middle East? Was it a black walnut or Persian walnut? Was it hickory? Was it cherry? I don't think they had cherry in that part of the world. Was it pomegranate? The beams and pillars of the temple of Jehovah that built at Solomon had pomegranate beams. We're supposed to believe the masons were rock cutters of the temple. You could have cut rock on the outside of the temple, and there were patterns there. The mason on the inside of the temple were metal workers. See Egyptian dictionary. And that was possibly Nephi and Laim, meaning they were restoring the temple. They possibly helped create the metal plates. Laban says his father had him for some time. How long? And how would that relate to the Josiah story? We got a temple, we got a treasury, and then who you throw under the bus? Remember the story of Nephi. One man perished, nation survives. You don't throw Peter under the bus. Yet, no. If we believe what we are told, Yeshua heals the ear of Malchus and says to Peter, yes, you will deny me. There's an event called, it's related to the Carnival. It's a celebration event, I think it's called Panim or some party. It happens one moon before the Passover. It's a holiday, reminding us of what Esther did, which she prostituted herself to save Israel. It's a very festive holiday. I'm not going to say some other things that I'm having ideas about, but that's when he was arrested. 30 days later, after being tortured, there's probably a reason I hate the number 7. There were probably 7 days of torture in the temple, taking over the Passover. The Romans were saying F you to the Jews. The Holy of Holies was rent. That may have happened as part of the torture. So these barbecues get hot. They probably planted trees near the barbecue. So you have a barbecue, you have an altar, and then you have the Holy of Holies. That's kind of how it goes. So Peter under the bus, yeah. Those that throw his son Judas under the bus, okay, yeah, knock yourself out. And then Caiaphas under the bus, yeah. So remember that what we have of that story is they're meeting the Sanhedrin, and they're talking. Think about rent. When you're disturbed and you think something's blasphemous, you rent your clothing, apparently. Joseph is sold into Egypt. Reuben is gone, and his brothers do this, and he comes back and he rents his cloth. If he wanted Joseph dead, why would he rent his cloth? We've thrown Reuben under the bus. Yet. I like yet. It's such a soft way to say no. It's like, but it's making it emphatic. Rent the temple, rent the cloth. They're having a conversation. Caiaphas and Yeshua, somehow the words get said. One nation perish and everything. And then Yeshua finally says something in the story we have. I don't know that any of it's accurate, but then Yeshua says something like, I was sitting on the right hand of the Father, which is clear blasphemy. Before he may have said things like, Moroni, Mormon, Yahweh, Jehovah, I am Jehovah. But now he's saying, I sit on the right hand of the Father, tied to death and being tortured and killed. And then think about where that would possibly put Saul in all of this. We know Saul was there and possibly threw a rock at Stephen. Did he participate in this 37-day torture? Okay, so you have a traditional story of the Passion of the Christ. I gave you an alternative version. He was tortured for 12 to 24 hours versus he was tortured for 37 days. They killed his loved ones in front of him. Hello, I love you. Come join the joyride. What's that? That would be a joyride compared to what actually happened. Let's finish with some light. So we have this word loose used several times. If I had to pick, I would lean towards Joshua just because I like Joshua. Yeshua, the Savior, and, and goeth from Bethel to Luz. So that ends with a Zaire. Remember I said Lutz? That ends with a Zaire. That's not Lutz. That's a Z versus a TS. It's 38, 70. And that's just bad language. You've got to have, if it's a Z, it's got to always be a Z, not a TS. Oh, at some point, so if you look at the torture it went on. At some point, they had to throw him to the lions, and that didn't work. They had to throw him in fire. That didn't work. They didn't have to. But why do we have stories of being thrown into a fire and not being burned? In Mormon tradition with Abraham, and Abraham is also there's a knife. The going in with a knife is the Mormon version of the story. Being thrown in a fire as a child is another version. You look at Emmanuel, which was this, which was the son of Ahaz in Isaiah 7. The tradition of the Jewish tradition is he was put into the fires of Baal, where they put a special oil ointment on him to save him from the fire. You have Nephi Lehi in the Book of Mormon in the fire, but not the first ones, the ones later. And you have, Daniel's friends. I don't like to say their names because I don't know their names well enough in Hebrew. And I don't want to say, we all know Adnak, Vedlak, and Abishiko, whatever, but those aren't their names. Those are the names given to them by the Babylonians, not by God. Amet, the cross. One big step or journey, two cuts. Dar la luz. Glory. Elementary, an elementary. Of course it was. Where life takes us. I already pulled up that mountain. Mountain of Almonds. These is a light tree. I'm sorry, first to bloom in the spring. Shazam is a super word. It's a cartouche. Okay, so now that was just half of it. Now we'd want to search for give the light. So if you can ever find it exactly phrased, that would be good. The problem with this is Greek, and then I could try to backtrack and find Roman or Hebrew words for it. But it'd be nice. So we don't have the word the, but I'm not worried about that. Ma'or, to give the light. So look at the difference between ma'or and or. So I'm not believing what they said. So I can say, so I already knew or was light. Or was light. I didn't know that. But now I have ma'or. So it's something about light. Why do I like ma? Remember, ma is M, which is waters. So or is 215. I'm saying it's ma or 3174. I'm really not thinking this is the original word for heaven. So we got firmament, Berkya, was that Berkla, Limorat, or is light, Limor, Ot, Ot is a plural. What's the li doing? It means thee. So this L all by itself is a primitive word. It's got to be. Remember, E means island, primitive word. Why would it be a primitive word? It would be a primitive word if it was somehow tied at the beginning of the story. To give light. Of course. If you can't see Lehi there, to give light. No, you added the L to your. What is that? Because or all by itself is a word to give light. And it was so. Okay. So it's such a. Okay. I'm looking for an L. Ilha.
Lail.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You light up my life. What song is that? Okay, Lai. And so Lai specifically. So this is what I need to do: is I need to go. That's Genesis. That's Genesis. There's 1:15. So or means light. Kumora. So then, one of the things I like to. So Job's a good one. A good. It's not as good as Isaiah, but Job is good in terms of language, proximity to the language of Isaiah. it again. He's probably in the name of God. Oh my gosh. What did I just say? Kumora. Isaiah 60. Kumora. Which is rise and shine. And then if I had young, or us, but young would be Jehovah. So I think you're on the ocean, you're worried, and then you see rising on the horizon, either with the sunrise or possibly because it's volcanic, you see it shining. You see Comoros. You see a mountain island. You may need water. I don't know how many days they travel on it. You replenish your brothers. So on the boat, it's hard to scheme, right? You're on a boat. It's pretty tight quarters. Your brothers conspire and they capture you. They turn the boat around. Where are they going? If they had talked to the sailors, it's like, oh, it's just like a 10-day journey up the Red Sea to get back to Eliot. So would they want to go back to Eliot, to Jerusalem, or would they want to go to Bountiful because they enjoyed it? They're turning back, and then a storm hits. I don't know if it was a true sailboat or a shunting boat. I don't know what the technology was there. But if you look at Egypt, it likely was a sailboat, not just a shunting boat. Camorra. Camorra. And they have a river called Moroni. And Moroni means the good captain. Is that what that means? Or does it mean the bitter affliction? Oxymoron. Bitter, sweet. He's getting shivved in the back by his friend. Et tu brute, shivved in the back by his friends. My current understanding is the 12 apostles could have been 6 men, 6 women. They could have stood in a prayer circle around him. They could have each died before him. And so, was Peter an apostle or a disciple? I don't like the idea that Peter denied the Christ. He just cuts off an ear. He's ready to go to the cross. But that's not his mission. His mission is to make sure that at least a version of the story becomes mainstream, because later you can clean it up. But you got to make sure that, otherwise you're like the Masoretics. They were disappearing. The Jews were nothing. They needed to recover their story. So it's better that an impartial story that has some directional truth. He suffered and died. That's true. And then, all the motifs and the mythologies on how may be incorrect, but those can be correct. It came full circle, so I think that's a good place to stop at 6:25. Chamonix, I like that. Is that 8? The number 8. Shalom, aloha, alar adar, glorious, the mountain of joy, loose, the arms, Mora. Shalom.